So my primary unit is this one here. This is the KISS Sidekick, but this is a very highly modified version of that. It's we call it a KISS Lunar. It actually has the scrubber from a KISS Lunar Mark 5P inside of it. The head has been completely remilled to accept that particular canister, and it's for me. It's something that, you know, when I first talked to Mike Young at KISS about, I had very specific needs, and he's such a great guy. He's always accommodated me for making changes and modifications and that type of thing. So he redid the new head for me, and I've always, for the last 15-20 years, I've used CIS canisters in my rebreathers. First in the CIS, and then also in my megalodons. I know some folks have a little negative feeling toward it because it's supposed to have a higher work of breathing. I am either used to it or I don't notice it or something, but I've never had any problems. I've had these scrubbers down to 120 meters, over 400 feet, and never had any problems whatsoever. Of course, I've never had super heavy work at those depths, so that potentially could be a problem. But that's, you know, at deeper depths with any CCR, you don't really want a heavy workload. Regardless, for me, having the ability to have a canister that will not give you a caustic, that's that warm fuzzy feeling when you're way back there, not being able to have a caustic. For those of you who don't know the CIS canisters, this has a hydrophobic membrane inside of it that allows gas to pass through but not water. When we trained on the CIS Lunars back in the 90s, part of our training regimen was to actually remove one of the hoses from the rebreather and let it flood while you were diving it. And the instructor would put it back on. You'd go to OC, flush the unit, and go right back on the unit, no caustic whatsoever. And so I've always kept that in the back of my mind, that was really a good feeling. Side mount CCRs have a tendency to be a little bit wet anyway, so I really wanted to make sure that if I'm doing CCR removals and going through restrictions and getting in all kinds of weird funky positions, that I wasn't going to have a higher opportunity for a caustic. And so that's why I've kind of gone with this. There are downsides to the CIS canister, obviously. A lot of, like I said, a lot of people say the work of breathing is not as good as other radial canisters. The other side of that is that these are 20-year-old canisters, and so that hydrophobic membrane, in some units we're having problems with them, although they still are very waterproof. No one's gotten any caustics from them at all. So a lot of people, including myself, have had problems where if it did get wet for some reason, it just locked up and it wouldn't let any gas pass through at all. Now, of course, if I'm 10,000 feet back in a cave, I'd much rather have that than a caustic that far back. But the whole point of using this canister so you can flush it and go back on the unit. At this point, we're having a lot of problems with not being able to do that. There's still a few canisters out there that do it. We're not sure why. I think possibly there may be a shelf life on the hydrophobic membrane. I'm not really sure about that. We have a couple of people who are looking at doing acid baths on the membranes and stuff like that to see if we can get them to start working the way that they're supposed to. But there's only a few that I know of that are not locking up when they get wet. But again, for me, I'd much rather have it lock up than have a caustic when I'm way back there. So I've kept on with the use of it. So that's one side of it. This is the original canister of a stock Sidekick. This is an axial. Of course, the CIS Lunar is a radial, and so this is the standard head. This would go into either model, either one of these. It's a standard. All of my units have the standard canister and counterlung setup, although everything else is kind of modified around it. So this is the actual standard KISS. On my particular unit, I loved it. I wanted to try to find something that was as close to my side mounts as possible. I wanted to have one cylinder on one side and the rebreather on the other side. A lot of folks prefer doubling up on the bailout, having alternatives to that. I wanted something that was just like my side mounts if I was just going with 2 tanks. I wanted it to be the same profile. This is as close as I've been able to get. So what I've done is Bill Gambrell makes these amazing Iconel sphere boots. Inside of here is a U.S. Navy Mark 15, Mark 16 Inconel sphere, 21 cubic feet at about 3,000 psi. They're rated for that higher when they're being used by the military, but these are old military stocks, so you probably don't want to take those much over that now. So the sphere is inside here. The valve itself had to be remilled to meet the specific threading of the military sphere, and so Bill Gambrell does that as well. And so I've had this modified to put on the bottom of the KISS Lunar. And so originally this boot was designed to where the unit itself would ride higher in the boot, and that left a space below for this valve to be turned up and put inside of the boot, so there was actually no sticking out profile at all. It was all just very slick and nice, but it makes the unit very long and it throws off my balance a little bit. So I was willing to deal with a little bit of something sticking out here in order to reduce the size of the unit and increase the balance, the better trim, better balance. For me in particular, I'm a short, stocky guy, so it really helped me out quite a bit. All I did was cut a smaller hole in the side of the boot and then tilt the sphere at about a 45-degree angle, and the valve comes out nicely. And then I've been able to keep everything nice and streamlined down against the unit itself. The first stage rides right up against my inner thigh, or my outer thigh rather, and so I can always feel where the unit is. And also this valve handle is in a good position where I'm not getting roll-offs, and it's a very fast reach if I have to shut down the O2. And this is the valve setup coming out of the Bill Gambrell sphere boot. The sphere is inside. It's been clamped down with these hose clamps, so it's nice and tight and rigid. It's not going to go anywhere. This is the hole I was talking about where I had to drill through and tilt the valve up, so the unit itself is coming straight down and hitting the top of the boot right here, and that's just the right size to have the sphere inside there. It does not hit the bottom of the counterlung, so we're not reducing the volume of the counterlung by squishing the cylinder, the sphere up inside there, so it lets it take its full shape even on full inflation, so there's no problems there. So this just gives you an idea of the profile in the back. The supply lines for the O2 run up the side here. Just quickly, this is a Lola bracket, and so this is how I put my diluent cylinder on when I'm diving duals. If I'm diving dual rebreathers side mount, then I'll have a 3-liter cylinder here with a supply to the dill, to the ADV coming off of that. And so, but I don't have to remove it when I'm diving it in a standard, what I consider my standard fashion, which is just a rebreather on one side and a dill bailout on the other side. So, so the supply lines for the O2 come up. One of the lines is the pressure gauge. Now I stow my pressure gauge right in between the 2 stacks. It hides very nicely in there. It's not a problem. It doesn't hit my ADV, excuse me, my OPV. Everything is nice and tucked away. And so instead of using a pressure gauge, which I used for years, a standard brass and glass pressure gauge, I went to an AI. And the AI lets me see the pressure right in my nerd. Some people are still worried about the failure rates on these, and that's a potential, a real concern. So I've had good luck with them so far. I've only been doing it for a little over a year, and if it fails, then I'll just abort my dive and head out. I know for me personally, with my metabolic rate, 21 cubic feet of gas, I'm going to do 6, 7, almost 8 hours on this. That's not including breaking it down for thirds, but I know the gas supply in there. If I have a leak, I can generally hear it. So essentially, I'm not really too worried about that. I know a lot of people who put button gauges on their O2s and dills on their CCRs, and they never look at them throughout the dive. So I still like being able to know where it is, but as far as the pressure, but right now I am comfortable using the AIs for that. The other lines that come out are the actual O2 feed. The O2 feed hoses come up. Here I have an inline shutoff for the O2, as most people do with even their back mount CCRs. So I'm able to shut that down very, very quickly. The other thing, just as a matter of convenience, is I've used an Omni quick disconnect here. And although it is definitely another potential failure point, it's worked out pretty well so far. I'm able to disconnect this at the end of the day and easily take the head apart without having to unlace all of the hoses out of the unit. This is just sheer laziness on my part. I've never had it come undone. It's always worked very well. You know, like any other connection, you got to maintain it, maintain the O-rings and all of that, and it's worked out pretty well. Other hose is this is the dill for the ADV, and so there's a QC6 goes straight in. I always just use my ADV by using my breath. Very rarely do I ever actually push on that. If I need to change the gas mixture at all, I'll let a little gas out my nose and then take a big inhale, draw in some diluent, and just work it that way. If I need to do a big flush, I'm able to do that with my breaths as well. I've got the ADV paddle in here adjusted to where it's very convenient, but it doesn't click on or doesn't keep adding gas anytime I change position. So it's worked out pretty well for me so far. Here's the AI that I was telling you about. In between the two towers, sits in there nice and well, all nice and hidden, and it's not. With AIs, sometimes you have to worry about shadowing, where is if the AI gets behind a piece of equipment or behind something, the signal will drop out. And I find in this position, it doesn't drop out at all, which is great. This is the MAV, and so this is this special MAV that Mike Young had put together for me, and it's got 2 orifices in line, which stabilizes the pressure on the back side, and then it's able to go to the needle valve here. And so one of the unique things about this setup is that this needle valve is actually ratcheted. Mike didn't like the way that there was really no way of keeping track of how far you had turned the valve with the swage locks and that type of thing. So he came up with this ratcheted system, and you can keep track of how much you turned it down on descent and how much you'll need to turn it back up on ascent. Like most of my dives here in the caves in Abaco, I rarely have to touch that. I've got it set for my metabolic rate. The only time I might even have to shut it down would be at deco if I'm trying to conserve a little bit of gas in the O2. I can draw it down because I'm not using as much gas or using as much oxygen. But this has worked out very well for deep diving. I'm able to take it down and close it down as I get to deeper depths. And this is really what's allowed us to take these units deeper. This is not a stock model. This is not available for commercial purposes. Mike was kind enough to kind of build this to my needs for our deep diving and research diving out here. And there's actually a twin model which actually has a dill side as well. And so you have a manual on that. There's obviously no needle valve on that side, but there's another button. And the button is very different from this one here, in that tactily you'll always know which one you're actually hitting. That one the dill one sticks out quite a bit further, and it feels very, very different. So great piece of equipment. It has just worked perfectly for my style of diving. So one thing that some of the Sidekick divers out there might notice is that I don't have the posts with the knurled brass knobs on the end of them holding the head on. I have the screws removed right now except for one. What I did is I didn't really like those sticking out, and I thought they might be some way of actually grabbing the line, and I have seen them come loose, but I've never seen anyone lose one, but I've seen them come loose on dives, and that to me showed potential for loss. So I was a little worried about that. So what I did was I actually backed those studs out and used the same thread, just got a countersunk stainless steel screw, and I countersunk the head a little bit on all four spots, and so I just used countersunk Allen head screws to hold the head in instead of those posts. Makes it very clean and streamlined. I have an alignment mark here that allows me to always put the head back in the same place, so I don't have to worry about not having those studs to line the head up on the way down. And so it worked out very well. It's very streamlined. Never had any problems whatsoever with it. Funky nerd mounting for the helmet is basically just a GoPro mount. I took the mounts and actually drilled holes in the outer flanges and stuck it to them like with the adhesive back like normal, but I also put in these small tie wraps. These are really tight. They're not going to break off or bust out. And so this is still removable, so when I travel I always take that off and carry that in my bag or someplace safe. And then what I did was I just used GoPro elbows. I had to modify one part of the standard GoPro mount. Once you do that, you're kind of committed. That particular thing had to be dremeled down to meet this elbow for the GoPro, but by using this I'm able to get all kinds of different angles on it, and it works out pretty well and stays up out of the way. I'm hoping that Bruce at Shearwater will come up with something much cooler and a lot less Home Depot than that, but for 4 years this has worked out really well for me. So this is my left side. This is my bailout / dill, and this basically just rides just like my normal side mount. It's the H valve like I described, and one side is the long hose. It's bungeed down the side of the cylinder, and it's on a breakaway, so that would ride on my left shoulder D-ring, and it would just, if somebody needed it, would pop off. All of this comes out, and we've got 7 feet of hose to do an OC exit. The other side of this is a small inflator hose, just like a lot of the side mount open circuit guys are using right now, guys and gals. And so my inflator is right on the center of my chest, and that makes it no-handed, so I can reach it with either hand if I'm busy with stuff. And then this is the bailout and dill feed. They both come around my neck like this. I have a shut off on the dill here. I'll shut that down like when I get to 6 meters or 20 feet, and if I don't want the ADV to keep triggering, if I change my body positions, go upside down, moving tanks or something like that, I'll just shut that off, and I flush with O2, and then it's 100% O2 for the rest of the duration. If I need to do an air brake, then I'll turn it back on flush and do a little bit of an air brake. And then the other side, this is my necklace that sits right under my chin, and so it's a very fast switch over between the loop and OC if I have to do that. And then this is the QC6 that goes right into the receiver on the ADV, and so that just clips in, and now you've got full capabilities of dill in the unit with an ADV. So that's my main. This is the way I dive. This is the harness I'm currently using with the KISS Sidekick. This is an XD Stealth 2.0 Tech version. The main things I want to show you on this are just the contact points of where I attach the unit to the harness. So the upper contact point, I have a regular bungee system here, and what I've done is I've shortened it quite a bit, and I put this ring. Now this is not a ring bungee system by any means. The only reason the ring is there so that I can get my thumb inside there and really pull down on it hard. That way I can keep it as short as I really need to make sure it sits up where it's needs to be. This is just a finding lanyard that's tied off to a second D-ring underneath. So I just pull on this, then get my thumb in this, and then I really pull this down hard. Now where I don't clip into the ring, I clip behind the ring with the clip that's on the head of the unit. I clip into that and then let the whole thing get sucked up and get really back up behind my ribs and get it as close to me as possible and as high as possible. And that keeps the work of breathing really good, and also keeps it from dragging in the dirt. The bottom part, or the left side where I keep the cylinder, is this one's set up for dual, so it's also set up with a short bungee. But normally this bungee would be normal size, like you would just with your regular OC side mount, and that would go around around the neck of the H valve, and then around the knob of the H valve. It wouldn't have this ring system on here. This would actually be another piece of small bungee and a loop that I call my finder loop. And I'll pull that, get my thumb in here, and then I'll just wrap it around the top of the cylinder. So that works out really well as well. I don't use an inflation cylinder because I rarely dive dry, only in California or Europe, or if I'm up in Florida. And then I'll generally just throw a longer whip on one of those first stages, probably the 7-foot hose, and a longer hose coming under my shoulder harness and then into my dry suit valve. That's worked out pretty well in the past too. So I never carry a dry suit inflation valve on that, or cylinder. The light I use, I'm butt mounting that right now. This is the Light Monkey, we call the Bahamas exploration system. And so I was able to con Joel and Corey into building me something that had an amazing burn time, the 90-degree angle for the cable coming out, so I can keep it tucked up under my harness, the ability to actually shut it on and off down here and lock it in place for travel, and then the head having multiple power, and you can come up or down either way. And then the other thing I have is, because a lot of my stuff is helmet integrated, I put the razor mount on there. This works out really well for me. Once you get your muscle memory down to this thing, it's really great. The best things I find in this, not only just that it holds it properly and holds it firmly, but if I'm doing photography, I'm able to cock this back, and this actually shines off the ceiling of the cave, lights up the back of my camera. And so I can actually see the settings on my camera, the knobs and everything while I'm working. It also keeps a hot spot from being in my photograph. And then for guiding and teaching, if I do have it on my helmet, which I rarely do, I usually always have it in my hand. But when I'm teaching and guiding, if I do have it on my head and I have to turn to a student or a client real fast, my muscle memory is to cock that down immediately as I'm turning my head, so I never flash them in the face. The other thing it does is it points it right at my hands, which normally when I'm turning around to a person, I'm going to go right into hand signals, so it's already pointing down at my hands. So it's really a great way to mount the light on your helmet. Well, that's pretty much it for Brian's KISS Lunar Sidekick CCR. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of this video. If you have any questions at all, please contact me at bahamacave@aol.com or on Facebook. Be glad to try to answer any questions, helpful hints, anything I can do to help you out. So thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video.